All right, we now welcome on Mike Monaco. You'll see him on the ACC network and call some Boston Red Sox games. Mike, how you doing?
Doing well, Carter. Thanks for having me on. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, so let's start this off. Red Sox are up 2-1 tonight going in. Connor and I hate baseball, so how are you how are you feeling going into tonight?
Well, first, you guys are missing out. Second of all, in all seriousness, no, I think if you're a Red Sox fan, you got to feel good about where things are. The way the offense has been hot right now. You got 6 innings from Eduardo Rodriguez last night, so the pitching situation is certainly better than what the Astros have right now, but definitely a long way to go if you're a Sox fan. You don't want to look too far ahead.
Yeah, not gonna lie, that was a bunch of Spanish. So that was talking baseball. So let's talk about your career real quick. How did you end up on the ACC network and calling games for the Red Sox?
Yeah, so figured out in college, went to Notre Dame that I wanted to do sports broadcasting and play-by-play in particular. Did a bunch of it there. From there, figured out, all right, what's kind of a path that can get me doing this so that I can try to get better at it. And so started in minor league baseball. Would do that in the spring and in the summer, and then in the off season of baseball would do college basketball. And so those roles kind of changed over the years in terms of which minor league team I was working for and where I was calling college basketball. But that was, that was and still is really the same script that I follow, doing baseball in the spring and summer, and then doing college sports. A lot of college basketball included within that when it's not baseball season. So a journey that's taken me from different minor league teams to getting a chance to fill in on some Red Sox games and fill in for the great Dave O'Brien. And then, basketball wise and college sports wise, first I was doing stuff at Western Michigan University, was sticking around calling games at my alma mater. And then from there, got a break with Big Ten Network and had a few great years there. With them and with Fox Sports, and then got hired by ESPN a few years ago.
So during your career thus far, if I asked you if there's a specific moment or game that you've called that really stands out in your mind, what would you say that? It could be a moment, game, anything like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Connor. A specific moment or game. I feel lucky that I feel like I've had a lot that have been really special. I probably shouldn't say this to you, but first time at Cameron Indoor, and not to choose Duke over Carolina, but Duke was my first game for ESPN. So that was a little special for me. But then, a week or two later was doing a game at Carolina and looking up at the rafters there and seeing everything that hangs there and the massive crowd. The few times that I've been there was pretty special. And then the first time I called a Red Sox game too, back in 2019, that was pretty incredible, walking into Fenway Park and into the broadcast booth.
I bet.
Is there someone you've called a game with? You're like, oh crap, I'm actually calling a game with this guy.
A lot of people, honestly. And that just comes from having so much respect and, growing up listening to a lot of people. But probably the partners with whom I work and have worked on some Red Sox games, like I mentioned, Jerry Remy and Dennis Eckersley, for similar reasons, guys that, like I said, I grew up watching and listening to, especially Jerry Remy, and then a Hall of Fame player in Dennis Eckersley. So those guys are a treat, and it's pretty special to sit next to them.
So how do you, during the broadcast, how do you balance the producer talking in your ear while you're also listening to your analyst and what they have to say? Because you have to have a response, obviously. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's tricky. It's a great question. Again, you gotta find a way to listen to your analyst, especially on TV where they might be talking more than they would be on a radio broadcast. And I like to always say, they're the star of the broadcast. Like, people want to hear what the former player, the former coach, the Hall of Famer has to say about what's going on. And that's not to diminish your own role, but they're set them up for success. So you do really want to key in and listen. And it sounds simple, but it's so important. So I think streamlining the communication to and from your producer helps with that, so that there's not any, extraneous conversation going on or words wasted. And then just trying to segment your thought process in your mind a little bit of okay, I am all in on listening, to my partner. And then when you hear something in your ear from your producer, okay, channel that, compartmentalize it, and then hopefully, pick back up where you were, or hopefully hearing a little bit of both. So yeah, it's a tricky balance for sure.
Do you like calling baseball, which is kind of seems like more of a podcast type setting whenever you have a lot of dead time in between pitches and all that? Or do you like calling basketball more, which is kind of more, let's go.
Yeah, you laid out the differences pretty well. I don't have a preference. I love both. I was always that kid growing up that loved whatever sport I was playing at that time of the year. And, family members would say, oh, what's your favorite sport? And I didn't have one. But it is different, and there's a fun style to each. And yeah, having a little more time to sink your teeth into some stuff and some storytelling and analysis and in baseball, and then the quick pace of basketball. And, it's 2 hours, you're sitting courtside, and, there's fewer players to think about and that sort of thing.
So Carter, if it's okay with you, I think we can transition to a little college football here.
One last question. Who's the guy you look up to? You're like, I emulate that guy.
It's too many. There's so many to answer that, but just great guys and girls in the industry who do this so well at such a high level. And I think you can always be learning from these people. Like I say this a lot too, but like, what other industry do you have a chance to like watch people work, and the people who do this job the best? Like you can flip on your TV, or you can go onto YouTube and go watch old games of hearing, whoever it is, Dick Enberg or Brent Musburger calling games, and hearing the way they do it. Whereas, if you're in a different line of work, you might not have access to watching people do what you want to do the best. But, a few at risk of leaving some people out, like the Mike Tiricos, the Sean McDonoughs, Adam Amin, Joe Davis, Jason Benetti, those types of people for sure. Brian Anderson. I could go on, but to name a few.
Actually, I do have one more question on this topic. How would you feel about potentially calling a game with Bill Walton, or what do you think about his style?
I think it's awesome. I love watching. That's great. I love watching and listening to his games. I think he's incredible. I'm definitely not as smart as he is, so he'd be probably running circles around me. But yeah, I think he's the best.
Is there some who's the number one guy you'd want to call a game with?
That's tough, man. There's so many. I mean, I don't think I could really narrow it down to one, but yeah,
give us a couple. Just give us a couple.
Why is that?
There's got to be someone you're like, man, I want to call a game with Chris Collinsworth or someone like that.
I mean, I think all of them though. In there's so many great analysts, like whatever sport it is. Yeah, Bill Walton would be fun. Like anyone who's doing it at a really high level, and who maybe has a different skill set than what I've worked with before would be really fun.
So now let's get into some college football, a little ACC action. Obviously, this season is not shaking out the way many predicted it would in the preseason. Being a Carolina fan, I know that firsthand. But what do you think about this next stretch of ACC games? How do you think the conference is going to shake out? Who do you think is going to come out on top?
Yeah, I mean, it's different. Like from what we expected going into the year and kind of where things were last year, I think it's really hard to predict. Like I would just ask you, Connor, like what's your take on how it has played out for UNC so far? Like you're probably even closer to it than I am. So
coming into the season, we were ranked 10th, which I thought was a little high, especially because we lost arguably our best 5 players to the draft last year, 2 receivers, 2 running backs, and then Chas right on the defensive end. So I thought we were a little high. And so I figured there'd be a little bit of letdown, but I didn't think we would be, hovering around 500 the entire season like we are. Yeah. So there's a little letdown there. But, the ACC this year is hard to predict. Obviously, Clemson is not the powerhouse they were last year in the last few years. So, it's just unpredictable. And I thought that coming in, but I didn't think it'd be to this level.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to predict. I think one thing that I've seen in other sports as well is because of the way college athletics are kind of coming out of last year's COVID craziness, I think there's more upheaval across the board, just in whatever sport it is, than maybe could have even been anticipated or was anticipated. Because you have people coming back for, like a 5th or 6th year of college. You have these rosters that are just built very differently than they were before. and then obviously like transfer situations are changing and continuing to change. And like, I'm gearing up for college basketball season and looking at guys who are now on rosters who I've called games of theirs like at 2 different schools. And like, I'm thinking about putting together a list of guys who are playing at like their 4th school now. It's crazy. But to circle back a little more specifically to what you were saying about the ACC, I'm not as close to it as I am college basketball, but I got a lot of respect for the Wake Forest program and the coaching staff there and the way that they've built things and, where they are now, whatever, 16th or wherever they're at. Yeah. And then I'm surprised, I think like a lot of people are by Clemson offensively. And, like I was expecting DJ Uyunglele to maybe hit the ground running more in a way than he has. I mean, I think a lot of people have, but, I try to always take a more to avoid the rash reaction. And I know that's tough, especially in a college football season, but like player development and progress and growth, like they're not linear necessarily. And there are ebbs and flows as tough as that is to wait out as from a fan's perspective.
Let's just move on to ACC basketball. We see the AP Top 25 just came out. Duke's at 9, UNC's at 10 or 19. Duke's finished to win the ACC. UNC's at 3rd. Who do you like to win the ACC this year?
I would have to pick Duke as it stands right now. I just think they're pretty loaded, especially with who they have coming back, the newcomers they bring in. But I'm really excited to see what Carolina looks like this year too. I think they're going to use their bigs in a way that is different from how they've used them in the past. Think about the guys that they added to the mix as well. Want to see what Baycott looks like with some new faces around him and just how that all shakes out. Virginia, them and Florida State, if there's 2 coaches that I've learned in my short time covering the ACC the last couple of years to never sleep on and to never doubt, I would point to Tony Bennett and Leonard Hamilton and what they have going. So it's going to be fun, and again, I think that we are going to see a little bit of, upheaval. Like everything's going to now reset, I think, a little bit in college athletics in terms of, we're going to go through a few years here of rosters being different because of all that has happened in the last, 18, 19 months or whatever. But it should be a really exciting year. I mean, we're sitting here, on a Tuesday, 3 weeks away from college basketball season, and the Champions Classic Tuesday will get us going. It's going to be so fun.
So not to turn this into a Carolina season preview, but I just want to harp back on your point about our, with Hubert Davis coming in this year, his first year, kind of a revamped roster. I watched the blue and white scrimmage the other night at the late night game, and Brady Manick, Dawson Garcia, McCoy, they can all 3 shoot the ball from 3 pretty consistently. So I feel like with Baycott down there on the block, instead of having a Garrison Brooks, who's obviously very talented, but it still crowds the lane. Like in the past, we've always had 2 traditional bigs. So,
right.
Do you see Carolina, coming out with a completely new style this year? And how do you think that'll work out in Hubert's first year?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say completely new, but I think it's probably going to be different. And I think that, there's already been chatter about this, that instead of, 3 out, 2 in and traditional 2 bigs, which was compared to the rest of college basketball, pretty atypical, that you probably will see some more 4 out, 1 in, however that those lineups and those rotations shake out, a little more, free flowing in that sense. And it'll be cool to see kind of what the ripple effects from that are. You said, stretch forwards who can step out and shoot the ball, maybe in a different way and from a different depth and different range. And then what impact that has on your backcourt too, in changing the spacing on the floor, so I'm excited to see that. And, it is crazy to think of like how different the front court is for Carolina. Like when you think of Brooks leaving, Kessler leaving, like the guys they bring in, and Garcia and McCoy and whatever, and just seeing how it's all going to look. I'm really excited to see Carolina.
Is there a sleeper team you like in the ACC?
That's a good question. Trying to think. It's tough. Like, Miami, if they had added, in the recruitment of Durant, that would have been big. I would say and you could accuse me of being a homer for this, but Notre Dame, like they bring back so much, and then they have Paul Atkinson who transfers in from Yale. They bring back a lot. It's a veteran team. I think I would point to them as, a team that wasn't ranked in the preseason top 25 in the AP poll that came out this week, but they're right outside. They're receiving votes. The metrics, the Ken Palms of the world really like Notre Dame, as they often do in their best years, because of their offense and the way they share it and the way they flow, to use a Mike Bray term. I would point to them. I think they've probably got a pretty big chip on their shoulder from the last couple of years and the way things played out. It's a veteran group, and Mike Bray has known that this group was going to grow together. And the class that started together a few years ago, and here they are. They're the upperclassmen for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, you just spoke a lot about Notre Dame. Do you realistically think that Notre Dame or any other team in the ACC has a shot to take one of those top 4 spots from Carolina, Duke, Virginia, Florida State? Or do you think it's pretty dead set that those 4 teams are going to finish in some order at the top of the conference?
I don't think it's dead set. I think there's enough turnover on any roster, not just those 4, but I think there's enough turnover and that there's enough just talent in the rest of the ACC. I'm curious to see what Syracuse looks like. They look very different, bringing in Jimmy Boeheim and Cole Swider from Villanova. Jim Boeheim is saying that, it's an excellent shooting perimeter, maybe the best he's ever coached. Jesse Edwards has packed on some pounds. Like, that's a bigger guy at the 5 now. And he's older. Like, can he step into a more, traditional 5 role that Syracuse always wants in that position? I look at them as well. Like, that's a very talented team. Louisville, a lot of turnover for them too. NC State, I'm curious to see what they look like. Casey Morsell, like, transferring there. That's a guy I really liked coming into college. It's, just thinking through as you asked the question, like, I could see so many teams that could make a run. So I don't think the top 4 is necessarily ironclad. But those 4 ranked teams in the top 25, that is how I would lay it out as well.
How do you feel about Coach K's farewell tour? I know he said it's not a farewell tour, but I'm a Duke fan, and anybody that has eyes realize this is a farewell tour.
It's not about the players, like he said. I don't think it will.
So how do you guys coexist? Little Duke Carolina here.
I think, with me and Carter, more so than our other friends, we're very reasonable about each of our teams, and we know whenever we're bad and we know whenever we're good. And we don't it's not like a butting heads rivalry. Some of our friends are just like psychotic fans and dude,
NC State fans. Oh gosh, sorry, exactly. My throat.
But yeah, we have a pretty coexistent relationship. We have mutual respect for each other's team.
What's like the craziest part of some of your psychotic friends, as you said it?
It's just that
NC State making the Final Four.
Yes,
let's just put it that way.
Yeah, people think that NC State is going to be insanely good, and every single year it's just not true. I don't know.
I'm a big Kevin Keats fan. I think he'll get a role in there.
Is he a winner?
Twitter rejoices.
Oh God.
But yeah, how do you feel about the Coach K farewell tour? It was inevitable that this was going to happen. And I'm also glad because there's I kind of wish Roy would have done one more year with fans too.
I agree.
Yeah. I think, however, different people want to go off in different ways, and however an individual coach wants to do it, I think it's awesome. And it's going to be incredibly well-deserved. And, it's a way too, where, there's some continuity in the changeover to John Shire, who, I'm excited to see what he does when he eventually is running the show himself. And, the recruiting couldn't be off to a much better start in that regard, but I think it'll be really cool to see the final year and how it all plays out. And yeah, having a much different atmosphere in terms of like what you were saying, like crowds, like it was weird. I did one college basketball game in person last year. And so, we're zooming into these almost empty arenas and calling games. Just like, what a weird experience for everyone, and way more than us, like for the players and the coaches. So I'm excited for them to get some more normalcy in what they love to do.
So real quick, I just wanted to touch on the preseason teams that the ACC released. Obviously, we got a couple of Carolina Duke guys on there, Baycott, Banchero on the first team, and then Mark Williams, Wendell Moore, and Caleb Love on the second team. Is there anybody on either of those teams that surprised you, or is there anybody that got left off that you thought, man, they should have been there?
Um, I would spin that a different direction. I'm really high on Mark Williams. Like when he got going last year, like I did a game, I'm trying to think, it was probably early January. It was early January, like January 3rd or something like that. And they played Wake Forest. And in the first, like before the first media timeout, he had started the game. He had like 3 turnovers in 4 minutes. And it was a freshman going through some serious growing pains, up until and through that point in the season. And then like you saw what he could become, and it shifted so suddenly and so drastically. So that's a guy I was super high on, like a lot of people, not breaking any news here, by the end of last year. But it's pretty, exciting to think about what he could be. I like Keve Aluma a lot. I think Mike Young is a tremendous coach. And to think of Keve Aluma's growth over the last, few years of the journey that he's been on, and the player he became last year, I'm excited to see what he can be. He's got an awesome motor, and is fun to watch, and should be even more skilled this year.
So this is probably the last question I have. What's your favorite place you've called a college basketball game?
Oof.
It's okay to say Cameron Indoor. It's the right answer.
Well, we're going to have to leave someone upset here. No, I would say, for me, it's Duke or Carolina, or, probably both of them. Like I said, so my first year calling games for ESPN was 2 college basketball seasons ago. And my first 4 games, it went game at Duke, game at Virginia, game at Duke. That was all like one trip. It was like a Friday, a Sunday, and a Tuesday. And so like I did 3 games without even going home in between, and I'm like pinching myself. Then I flew home, must have been a Wednesday after that second Duke game, was home for like a day. Thursday, flew back down to North Carolina because I had a game at UNC on Friday night. So in a span of like 8 days, I did 4 games of Duke twice, Virginia once. They hung their banner from the year before the national championship, obviously, and then Carolina. So awesome. Picking a favorite out of that would be like, like if I had kids, picking a favorite child. But seriously, like that's not to hem and haw here and not give you a direct answer. Like for a guy who grew up loving college basketball, and I don't think it's hard to see like how much love I have for college basketball. It's like, it was so cool to go. Like I had never set foot in Cameron. I had walked around it. I'd done the same at the Dean Dome, and then to set foot there as well, like incredible stuff. And you're sitting in the crow's nest at one place, you're sitting courtside, and like both are still so unique. Like I remember being like, oh, this is so cool, like walking up to that vantage point at Cameron, and then sitting courtside at UNC and seeing like a JV game going on, and getting to know like how that all plays out, something you've heard about but like you've never seen it up close and personal. And like Cole Anthony out there and stuff. It was really cool. I can go on and on about both those places, but those would probably be my top 2.
So the last question I wanted to leave with is, looking ahead to this upcoming season, in your mind right now, is there maybe 1, 2, or 3 games that you would love to get assigned to call? Like maybe obviously Duke Carolina would be, I assume, near the top of your list, but a couple of games that you would really want to get assigned to that you think would be a lot of fun to call.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like who wouldn't? Anyone at ESPN or any other company would love to call a Duke Carolina game, but those are reserved for the cream of the crop, and one of the best to do it, Dan Schulman. So yeah, like those, I think would be great. I mentioned a couple, like Notre Dame, Syracuse. Those have they've played some great games over the last few years, and with kind of what we talked about with both those teams, like those could be fun games. If you're looking at individual games, Virginia Tech has played a lot of tough games the last couple of years. I think that's a fun team. So yeah, I mean, you could go any number of ways. It's hard to narrow it down, I would say, to like specific games. But yeah, and then I mean, like we say this every year, but like we should not be sleeping on Florida State at all. They like seriously, they reload in whatever way they do. They lose, the Vassell's and Williams and Trent Forrest after a couple of years ago, and they stock right up last year. And I think this is, like them getting picked second or whatever it was this morning. Like it's amazing that like that hasn't happened before or regularly with the program they've become. So you can't sleep on Leonard Hamilton in Florida State.
All right. Well, Connor, you have anything else?
One last thing just for the podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
What is y'all's, I'll ask everybody this, what is y'all's pick to win the ACC? Who is y'all's pick to win the ACC this year? If you had to choose one team.
If you put a gun to my head, I'd say Duke right now.
Okay. The fan in me wants to say Carolina, but realistically, I think Florida State.
Florida State? What do you love about them? Because I mean, I like I said, I think more people should be annually respecting them.
It's not necessarily what I love about Florida State. It's what I know about the other teams picked near the top. I know Duke's going to have a lull. They don't play a crazy non-conference schedule. I think they'll have a lull. They'll still finish top 2 or 3 in the ACC. But I think Florida State is put together well enough to where they can, beat the teams they're supposed to beat and also get a couple games that they maybe shouldn't win.
What concerns you about Carolina?
It's Hubert's first year. I think we're going to have a few growing pains, not necessarily with young players, but more so just gelling together as a team. We have so many new pieces coming in. There's not a crazy amount of continuity from last year. So I think we might have a couple losses early on that maybe might, throw some people into a panic, but I think eventually we'll figure it out near the end of the year.
Yeah, I would go. I mean, the fan in me is going to say Duke, and I mean, it's hard to pick against Virginia every year. It just seems like they're there every year. Regular season, I would pick Virginia. ACC tournament, I'd go Duke or Florida State. I feel like those teams will make those runs randomly, but I just don't think Virginia has that much true talent to win. But throughout the ACC schedule, they play such good defense every single night that they just win the ACC regular season every year. Duke has that weird January stretch every year where their freshmen have to play that first true road game at PNC Arena or down in Miami where they always struggle. They come back to Duke, and then they slowly get on a good run, figure out the rotation.
Yeah, just one point on Virginia. I was doing NBA preseason game, Bulls-Pelicans, a couple weeks ago, and the Pelicans have Trey Murphy. And I was just, again, marveling at his arc and his journey. It's the day before the season opener last year when they find out that he's eligible. And so instead of redshirting this guy who had began his career at Rice, he all of a sudden is a guy who's going to get some run for Virginia. And he hit 6 3-pointers in his first game of the year, his first game with Virginia. And then he ends up a first-round pick. He's had a great preseason for the Pelicans. And could the Virginia staff have seen that playing out the way it did, where he contributes the way he did last year, which they weren't expecting because they didn't know if he'd be eligible and they were planning on a red shirt. And then to the point where he's gone after that 1 year. So that is a sidebar for sure. But when you think about Virginia and the player development there and the way they identify talent and the way they get people to buy in defensively, like you were saying, Carter, what an awesome program and what a great coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Virginia. I hate the style of basketball they play. It's boring. I mean, to be honest, I hate boring basketball. But when you see a guy like Kihei Clark his freshman year, like, what is this guy? Like, he is not almost didn't even seem D1 ready, let alone ACC ready. All of a sudden, he's one of the most important players on their title-winning team.
And is a great player right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like, what he does defensively, incredible. And, like, I had him in a game against Notre Dame last year where, like, he was using his body to post up guys way bigger than him and just, like, contorting himself with these post moves. And then, his vision as a passer, his defense, he's one of my favorites in the ACC.
Connor, that it?
I think that's all. I just wanted to say thanks a lot for coming on. This was awesome. Appreciate that.
Yeah, fellas, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Good to talk some hoops in particular of everything we covered. But cannot wait for basketball season.
Good luck to your Red Sox tonight. Everyone go follow Mike on Twitter at @MikeMonaco_. And hey man, appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.